Well, apparently it's enough to bring people together. Democrats uncovered, or documents uncovered at the homes of President Biden, former President Trump, and former Vice President Pence now have Dems and Republicans on the Senate Intel Committee with the same complaint. The Intel chair, Mark Warner, a Democrat, and Republican Vice Chair Marco Rubio say they still have no timeline for when they may get to see those documents, and they want to know what's in them.
Our job is to make sure there's not an intelligence compromise. The notion that we're going to be left in limbo and we can't do our job, that just cannot stand.
If in fact those documents were very sensitive, materials were sensitive, and they pose a counterintelligence or national security threat to the United States, then the intelligence agencies are tasked with the job of coming up with ways to mitigate that.
And a bipartisan group of lawmakers, not just the ones worried. A new poll finds 2/3 of Americans who took the poll are concerned about the handling, just in general, of classified documents by the former presidents, Biden and Trump. The document debacle is fueling speculation about Biden's potential 2024 run, and a former Clinton advisor has a warning.
Joe Biden can be defeated in a Democratic nomination. Pretty much anybody that reads on him can knock him over. I think it really affects Biden. It goes way beyond that he has classified documents. I think that that's going to be absolutely the end of it for Biden.
Ooh, doom. Washington Times opinion editor Charlie Hurd is here, and former Democrat congressman from Tennessee, Harold Ford Jr., both Fox News contributors. Look, Harold, I'm going to start with you. I have heard you say on this very network that this is, in fact, a problem for Biden. Yes, it can be for everybody, but he's the incumbent.
Well, first off, thanks for having me on, and happy Monday. I think whenever anyone handles classified documents in a way that they're not supposed to be handled, that's a serious issue. I listened to Mr. Morris's comments, and he certainly is entitled to his opinion, and he could very well be right. What I'm most relieved by is two things. One, that you have a bipartisan set of voices on the Intelligence Committee saying that they'd like to get a risk assessment, an intelligence assessment here, because as both Mr. Rubio and Mr. Warner said over the weekend, this is something the country deserves to know, and if there needs to be some mitigation, we should move forward with that on Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden. It's important to note that they've not gotten a briefing on either. So this is serious for the country, and I hope that that the White House will give them the briefings that they're asking for.
So is any of this compounded by the fact that both of these former presidents now have special counsel looking into them? Investigations have been opened. Charlie?
I think I do think it does. And by the way, I also agree with Harold, and I think that that Mark Warner is exactly right. This is not about the handling of classified documents that may or may not contain national secrets as much as it is about actual national security. And the reason I think that is so important, particularly when it comes to, in my estimation, Joe Biden, is the fact that the documents that Donald Trump, obviously Democrats have made unsupported claims that the documents held by Donald Trump were somehow a violation of national security, but they offer no real evidence of that. The real question is when you have Joe Biden taking these documents and having them lying all over his houses and his garage and everywhere over the past 6 years, where you have a son who has access to these documents, who's clearly selling access to the government, and maybe, we don't know, maybe national security secrets, it becomes a huge problem. So it's not about the actual classification of documents and the handling of them as much as it is about national security. And Mark Warner is exactly right about that. In a bipartisan fashion, they need to get to the bottom of that question.
You know what? It's longer than
Biden.
6 years, though, right? Because for Biden, and he's the one that would have taken those. I mean, that was 15 years ago that he was in the Senate. And that's part of the problem. I mean, those things have been passed around like we don't know where they've been. We don't know what movers moved them from here to there. Harold.
No, I would agree, which is, again, it begs the question and why I think that both Mr. Rubio and Mr. Warner are right. They also raised the prospect of maybe we classify too many documents, but I think that question is subordinate.
Well, we know Obama thought that because he tried to, with his 13526, address that notion so that more people could declassify their own. But the fact of the matter is that so far, the only person that we know who had top secret documents, foreign intelligence on Iran and China and Ukraine, was the current sitting president, Biden. All right, let's move on.
Well, I don't know if that's a fact, Harris. I think
no, that's what's been reported. Now we don't know what's in everybody else's,
right,
but that's what's been confirmed.
Fair enough.
3 House Democrats are not backing down after Speaker Kevin McCarthy booted them from their committees. Here's a bit.
This is some Bakersfield BS. It's Kevin McCarthy weaponizing his ability to commit this political abuse.
I don't accept the premise that this has anything to do with the conduct of any of the Democratic members. This is merely the weakness of Kevin McCarthy's speakership, that he's so reliant on these extreme members.
To smear someone and their character, their love for their country, and the work that they get to do on a committee is wrong, and it is politically motivated.
By the way, that weird reference that Eric Swalwell made to Bakersfield is where Kevin McCarthy is from, Bakersfield, California. No, he spit that out like it was some D-list TV show, but it's actually a beautiful area of California.
He's a comedian.
Yeah. Oh, so funny. So you saw Ilhan Omar there. I want you to see this. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar claimed ignorance when confronted with the allegations of anti-Semitism. Let's watch.
I certainly did not or was not aware that the word hypnotize was a trope. I wasn't aware of the fact that there are tropes about Jews and money. That has been a very enlightening part of this journey. To insinuate that I knowingly said these things when people have read into my comments to make it sound as if I have something against the Jewish community is so wrong. My work is clear. The collaboration and work that I do with my Jewish colleagues is very clear.
All right, just so we don't get the words twisted, let's use our own. Tweets from the Congresswoman, 2012. She said Israel has hypnotized the world and committed, quote, evil doings. 6 years later, she defended her original comments, saying, drawing attention to the apartheid Israeli regime is far from hating Jews. Is she confused? What is it? If she thinks that she can spit these words out, which is what she said over the weekend, I've been leading on the issue of anti-Semitism. How can you lead, Harold, if you don't know the definition of the word or act like you have any clue about it?
Look, I'm not a defender and apologist for any of those words or for her. I don't know her. I do think that people have an opportunity, should have an opportunity to grow, and I hope that from 10 or 11 years ago, one of the tweets, and then I think maybe 5 years ago, I hope that she's grown, because we want people to do that. I do hope that at some level, at some point, the tit for tat in politics stops. I mean, Democrats were wrong to do this in the last Congress to some of the Republican members, and I think it's wrong to do this to these members. But Mr. McCarthy's in his right to do it, and we'll see if when he gets to a vote to remove Ms. Omar from her committee, if indeed he has the votes to do that.
And you don't think that this is a reason why? You don't think that this is a good enough reason for him to do that? I mean, it's a short show, it's only an hour long. We literally could do a slow scroll and a fast scroll. There's so much material on her with this.
We could do that with Miss Marjorie Taylor Greene and others. I hope people grow is all I meant, Harris, by that. If she showed those same views, because I think what she said before was wrong and she needed to apologize for it. If she did not atone for that, then I think you're right. But I think if we're going to focus on a member of Congress being removed, it probably should be the fellow here from New York.
Charlie, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, no, I mean, Ilhan Omar is indefensible. The comments that she makes are indefensible. And it's kind of pretty rich to listen to her claim that the reason that people are against her is because she's Muslim. That's disgusting. It's not true. It's because of the stupid, vile things she says. But I will say this. I don't think that she should be kicked off of her committee because she holds says vile things. I think that the best way to deal with this is for Democrats to throw her out of the party, or Republicans to beat her in a general election back home. That's the problem. Whether we like her or not, she represents 750,000 voters back home, and we have to deal with that, and she has a voice.
And you mentioned the gentleman from New York, so I'll also let you respond to that. I assume you're talking about George Santos. Go ahead, Charlie.
Oh, yeah, no, I would put George Santos in the same category. Whether we like it or not, he represents 750,000 voters back in New York, and he needs to be beat at the polls.
All right, good to see you both, gentlemen. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Power Panel.
Great to see you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.